This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Will Friedle, the voice of the future Dark Knight, Batman Beyond.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Gotham City is a wasteland. Deep in its valleys of iron and steel, superbugs wreak havoc.
Who's up for some laughs?
The only hope for the future is the new Batman on the block.
Let's go.
Batman Beyond. Justice returns to Gotham.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 334 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, with me, my good friend, good brother, Liam, our other host. Liam, we are continuing here with our Back to the Future month, and we really should have named it, like, I don't know, there should have been something snaky involved with this month, because we've got Kobra popping up in a couple of these episodes, at least, enough to maybe make it a theme, but I guess technically last week had nothing to do with Kobra, so I guess we're just fine with another Back to the Future month here, but we are once again reviewing the next episode in streaming/DVD order here on the program, and it's an interesting one, as I alluded to there. It does in fact bring back Kobra, who we previously saw in an episode of Batman Beyond, but most recently saw in that Static and Batman Beyond crossover episode we covered just a few weeks ago. So going to be an interesting one to talk about here. The first of two parts of this episode. Also, one of the things that they started doing here all the way in season 3 of Batman Beyond.
Yeah, that's right. Like we said, there was other than the pilot, Rebirth 1 and 2, there were no two-parters for a long time, and then we got two almost back to back in the final stretch here. So we are bringing you Curse of the Kobra Part 1 this week, and as mentioned, we'll give our temporary scores for this week, and then as with all of the other two-parters we've reviewed in the past, the two parts will have one joint score at the end, but we'll see where we're sitting after part 1 this week. And of course, before we get there, I have our official IMDb synopsis to read.
That's right, Liam. And for this episode, which originally aired here in the States on the Kids WB back on February the 3rd, 2001, meaning we will be coming up here in a couple of months on the 24-year anniversary of this episode's original air debut. Of course, before we get the official IMDb synopsis, we will, of course, remind you that it is brought to you by The Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower today, and we invite you to subscribe to that channel, because not only do you get access to our entire catalog, including all prior 333 episodes of the podcast, you also get our bonus episodes. We got more than 50 of them sitting there on the channel as well as a couple of spin-off podcasts for our other projects, like Discuss This League. And then, of course, not only do you get all that content, but you get the full Tim Talk podcast content as well. They have an entire library of their own of things that they covered on their podcast. And then, of course, rounding things out, we have the ongoing series from the folks at Watchtower Database, their Jump on the Bat-Wagon podcast, as well as their Intergang Interview podcast, all in one convenient streaming area for your listening pleasure. That's youtube.com/The Pod Tower. Head over today and subscribe.
That's right. So this is the synopsis for Curse of the Kobra Part 1. Or is it The Curse of Kobra? No, it's Curse of the Kobra. But there's on the Blu-ray extras, there's a little bit where Bruce Timm and the rest of the crew there can't quite remember what this one ended up being called. Regardless, it's Curse of the Kobra Part 1, according to the Blu-ray version at least. And that Part 1 was written by Rich Fogel, directed by James Tucker, with music by Michael McQuistion, and animation by Coco and Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. Terry goes for advanced martial arts training at a special dojo, but there's far more to one of his fellow students than he realizes.
Oh, come on. They missed out on using Then Meets the Eye there. Come on.
I was going to say.
I was jonesing for Liam in his announcer voice to do more than meets. We were robbed. That being said, I guess that's a special dojo sounds funny.
That and like there's also a thing like where there's a snake cult that's trying to get a bomb. Although to be fair, Terry going to karate school and meeting this guy is probably takes up more of the runtime than the snake cult stuff, at least here in part one.
It sure does. So let's get into our synopsis of the episode ourselves, Liam, here for part one as we open things up with a delivery that's being brought to the Nova Research Center. A man has arrived past the time where they're accepting deliveries, but manages to beg his way into dropping off whatever is in his cargo truck. He pulls up to the dock and begins to unload. And wouldn't you know, it's the old three guys hiding in the back of a truck bit here.
Sorry, no deliveries after 5.
Give me a break, will you? I was stacked up for hours on the I-17. What am I gonna do with these isotopes?
Okay, loading dock 5.
Thanks. You've got 2 minutes.
Keep the engine running.
And they get out. They immediately get to
That's
work.
2 weeks. Our show starts with the bad guy hanging out in the back of a truck.
It's true. We're developing a pattern here of it feels like trucks should have some sort of higher security, especially when they have a giant empty place for guys to hide in the back of them. But yeah, the security's pretty lax here. The 3 Kobra members that we recognize jumping out of the back are told to work quickly by the guy that drove them in. They begin loading in what is revealed to be a R-12 thermal bomb. So there's a bomb that they're loading into their truck, whatever, that is property of the U.S. government, apparently. And thankfully, just in time, Batman shows up and begins to take out the goons one by one. A particularly violent shot of a batarang disc, or whatever those red discs are, to the face of our driver temporarily disables him, as Batman is able to take on the other 3 expendable crewmen of the Kobra gang. And just as it seems like he's victorious, from behind, the aforementioned driver reveals that he apparently has been trained in some pretty heavy martial arts. Not only that, but he's got these really incredible electrified nunchucks that work also as sort of like a taser-like object. So he and Batman go at it, and unfortunately, Batman is bested rather quickly, overwhelmed by this gentleman's fighting skills, allowing him and the 3 Kobra agents all to escape with the thermal bomb, and Batman sort of left there licking his proverbial wounds. And the very next scene, we see Terry in the Batcave with Bruce, who's helping him tend to those literal wounds, and Terry's beating himself up pretty badly.
I know, I screwed up big time. Ow!
This will keep the swelling down.
You're thinking, how could he let Kobra get away with a bomb that can incinerate half the east side? Because I'm a hopeless loser, that's why.
Actually, I was thinking you should meet an old friend of mine.
Who?
Bruce says that he actually wants him to meet an old friend of his, and that he believes that this person could be of help. So we cut next to Terry in a different part of Gotham. It looks like a fish market. He's there looking for Bruce's friend named Kyrie, and he's there searching. He walks up to a fish merchant who he asks and introduces himself. The fish merchant doesn't appear to understand what he's looking for, continuing to try to sell him fish. Terry is not interested and says that Bruce Wayne sent her. She invites him to a back room where she says what he's looking for is waiting. Terry's either super gullible or just thought that this must be the person that Bruce was having her meet, because he follows this person into a back room, stands there waiting while she excuses herself. Just he's standing there, and then all of a sudden he's attacked by two guys that attack him. They have katana staffs, and they are kind of whacking him around. He's able to defeat one, but one of them comes back and overcomes him and leaves him there. Kind of has the bow at his throat, ready to attack. And that's when, from the side, the same woman who was selling the fish emerges, wearing her, what do they call that? The
A gi, I believe.
yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. So she emerges wearing a gi, and she has suddenly lost her, what I would dub, stereotypical Asian accent.
Mhm.
And she speaks perfect English and reveals that Terry needs to work on some stuff, and that he has a vulnerability on his left side.
Bruce was right. You've got the moves, kid, but you lack discipline. And you leave yourself open on the left side.
Ow!
We'll have to work on that.
Who are you?
Kairi Tanaga. Years ago, Bruce and I studied together under the same sensei. Now I run this dojo.
What happened to your accent?
It helps sell fish. This is where we train. Xander is one of my advanced students.
Not bad. Can you teach me?
Only if you'll follow my directions without question.
She then reveals that she's a longtime friend of Bruce's, that they both studied under the same sensei, and that she is now the owner of her own dojo, and that Bruce has sent Terry, there to work on his skills, and she agrees to help him, but she makes Terry promise that he will obey everything that she asks. So we cut back to Terry and Max as we see Terry's diet no longer consists of pizza and wings. It's now eel juice and brown rice and tofu in a blender that he's forced to drink. And let's just say it's not sitting very well with his stomach as he gets the shudders as he drinks it. Max, on the other hand, very excited for him, and even mentions perhaps the idea of joining Terry in her own training at the dojo, which after seeing Terry drink the eel juice, she decides that maybe it's not for her at that point. But we cut back and we kind of see a little bit more of what Terry's workout is, as he's balancing a chair on his head as Kyrie watches on. The other students are nearby. We see a third student that we have not previously seen working on his own. Or actually, I guess he was previously seen knocking the head off of a dummy in one of the previous scenes. But we learn his name is Xander, and they're all working on their craft. Kyrie's sort of pulling if you've ever seen the Karate Kid moment, Mr. Miyagi type training, where she very quickly shows Terry the error of his ways, to not get too cocky, throwing some sushi on the floor as he tries to balance this chair on his head, and he slips. Terry quickly becoming very frustrated and upset that it wasn't fair. She mentions that things at the dojo, in fact, are not fair, and that's enough for Terry for the day. So he walks outside, and he's after finishing his workout, and notices that Xander walks by with two big burly men, and after Terry says hello to him and kind of tries to stop and chat with him, he's shoved out of the way by one of the bodyguards, and Terry watches Xander get into a car accompanied by the two strange men. Terry none too happy about what's going on. So up next, we see Terry leaving the dojo, quite shaken a little bit confused by why he was treated so poorly by the bodyguards. He's on the phone with Bruce, talking about how his lessons are going, and Terry again seems to have a little bit of confidence issues, saying that he feels like he'll never get it. And at the same time, he's interrupted. No nuns and dynamite this time, Liam, but it is a man who quite frantically is running towards Terry, screaming for help, and is being pursued by a couple of members of the Kobra gang, riding some pretty fancy bikes.
That's right. So Kobra chases the man down before Terry can really intervene, and they gas him and they take a vial from him and leave the scene. And so Terry is kind of left wondering what could be happening there. Back at the Bat Cave, Terry and Bruce kind of discuss the issue. And as Bruce checks up on who this person was, they discover that it's a Dr. Padu Banjari and that he is a paleontologist working at the Gotham Natural History Museum. And so Terry and Max take a little field trip, as Bruce says, over to the museum. And as they're kind of looking around at the displays, some foreshadowing dinosaur displays that are there in the studio. This is more of a note for visuals. I couldn't tell if that was the same T-Rex from A Little Piece of Home or not. If this is the reused model.
It definitely looks like the same model, I would say.
But yes, so as they're discussing things, they go and they find somebody who works there, I guess. And Max is quite literally bats her eyelashes at the guy to distract him so that Terry can sneak into Dr. Banjari's office and try to discover what's going on.
Dr. Banjari's office should be down this way.
Hey, what are you doing here?
Just admiring your work. A Pachycephalosaurus, isn't it?
Why, yes. How did you know?
I'm into fossils. Nice femur. Where'd you find it?
Actually, it's a rather fascinating story. I was looking for an iguanodon in Wyoming when I noticed a striated ridge just off to the west.
Really?
Somehow I had a hunch I might find something interesting there, so I started digging.
I'm in.
What was Banjari working on?
1 sec. I'm checking his files. Got it. Whoa. Interesting. I think he was recovering ancient dinosaur DNA.
DNA and thermal bombs. What's the connection?
He re-ups with Bruce, putting the earpiece in and chatting with him as they begin to look into just what Dr. Banjari was researching. We find out that he was looking at trying to clone. He's Jurassic Parking it. He's trying to clone dinosaur DNA, which leads to, I think, maybe the best worst line in the history of this television show, which is Bruce Wayne going, DNA and thermal bombs. What's the connection? Awful. But funny. But yeah, so they're kind of left stroking their chins a little bit as to what exactly is going on. So we cut back to the dojo as Terry is once again a little bit overworked and not exactly having a ton of success. And he heads out to have a little bit of a break where he sees Xander sitting next to this little koi pond that's in the center of the facility, and they begin to discuss things. Xander sort of apologizes for how rough his bodyguards were with Terry, explaining that since a very young age, he was born to lead his people, and that his handlers are very protective of him. And so Terry, as they're discussing it, realizes that Xander's led a very sheltered life and hasn't really had an opportunity to ever be a kid, despite that they're the same age. And so Terry and Xander organize a little bit of a breakout, so to speak, from training, and they head off into the city to get Xander his first slice of pizza, which Terry is incredibly can't believe that Xander's never gotten the pleasure. So they head out to Cheesy Dan's. I can't believe there's like a nearly adult teenagers going to Chuck E. Cheese. I know they go here all the time in episodes. It's just funny that it's like the Chuck E. Cheese stand-in is where all the teens hang out in Batman Beyond.
Sure.
But anyway, as they get there, Max is already there, and she offers to show Xander some of the video games that are on display at this wacky little arcade. As Terry goes off to get the aforementioned pizza, we see them playing. There's a lot of little throwbacks. They're playing the Centuries of the Last Cosmos video game here, and Max gets the better of Xander in some kind of VR fighting game version of that. And as they're Xander's a little bit taken aback because he actually loses the fight, and he's not comfortable with that, demanding a rematch.
Game over. Who's bad? Who's rad? Who's never been had? Woo!
But I never lose.
It's a first time for everything, sport.
You don't understand. I can't lose.
It's just a game, Zandy. Get over it. Besides, the pizza's here.
All right. But then we play again.
It's your funeral.
Is she always like this?
Afraid so.
I don't remember ordering bacon on my pizza.
Oh, no.
And where's the double pepperoni?
That's ours.
Is it? Silly me. Give the man his pizza.
Before they can discuss anything further, Terry arrives with the pizza, and they all begin to eat and seemingly have a great time when none other than the Jokers show up to ruin everybody's fun. They throw pizza in Xander's face and sort of are generally menacing. And so Terry, Max, and Xander begin to attack them. And as the ringleader here, the J-Man, the Bruce Timm one, attempts to run away as all his fellow gang members are getting thrashed by Terry and Xander, especially. Xander rushes after him and catches up to him and gives him what for before the bodyguards kind of come in and demand that Xander leave with them, and that they're so furious at him for leaving the facility without taking them with him. So that's the end of Xander's fun, seemingly for the night. And we then cut back to the official reveal here of exactly who these people are that Xander was bred and grown up to lead, and that is none other than that same darn snake cult, Kobra. And we see that their plan at this point, there's some gas chambers that these guys go into in little diapers, and they're turning into dinosaurs. So I guess the bomb thing isn't exactly figured in yet, but yes, we see that Xander he's sort of the prince of Kobra. He's like young Serpentor here, I guess, as he is being bred and taught everything about what it means to be a leader of this cult. But he's a little dismissive of his handlers, of his bodyguards, and he mentions that since the plan isn't quite ready to go through yet, he has one more thing he wants to do. At which point we cut back to Max's house, where first she and Bruce have a little bit of a tiff on the phone, which is funny.
Maybe it's for the best, you know? I got kind of a weird vibe from that guy.
Yeah, but I still feel bad about it. Like it's all my fault.
Don't let it keep you up nights.
Max, get off the line. Some of us have work to do.
Ouch.
Well, excuse me for living.
Like I like that all of a sudden, and it's one of those things where like it's a shame we know we're almost done, because I feel like all of a sudden they've set up this kind of funny dynamic between Max and Bruce.
Correct.
That we don't really get to ever expand on it because we have 3 episodes left after this.
Right.
But yes, they're having a little bit of discussion, and Bruce tells her to get off the phone so he can discuss the case further with Terry. And that's when Max gets a fateful knock at her door.
That's right. Doesn't seem like she's expecting anybody, but she does go to the door, look through the peephole, and we see it is none other than the aforementioned Xander, who we learn was excommunicated. Well, he wasn't excommunicated. He was removed by his bodyguards, whoever's in charge of him, removed him from the dojo. So Terry feels bad, I guess, in a way, because he feels like he's kind of responsible for getting Xander removed. But Kyrie mentions that Xander's training had been pretty much finished at that point, and that his guardians removing him really just kind of cemented that there wasn't anything else for her to teach Xander at that point. And that she mentions that his path was already sort of predetermined by those that are in charge of him. And for Terry, though, the training must continue. So Xander, as we mentioned, has popped up here, and Terry and Max were discussing Xander's departure from the dojo on the phone. So she's quite surprised to see Xander here at the door. She opens the door, and I will say the next like 2 minutes, you could make this into a meme, probably. I'm just going to go on based on experiences that I've seen women recount. But it's essentially what happens when an incel or somebody slides into their DMs. She's like, no, thank you. I'm not interested. Closes the door. And then the dude just continues a barrage of inappropriate comments and incel-like behavior. Well, Xander's no exception here, as he literally breaks down the door after Max says that she's not interested. He's going after her, chasing her through her apartment. She manages to get on the phone, though, and dial Terry back. And we have Bruce yelling at her again to get off the line. But they hear her, or Bruce hears her screaming and crying for help. So he gets on the line and tells Terry to head over to Max's apartment. But unfortunately, at that point, Xander has already absconded with Max in his vehicle. So Terry and the Batmobile chases after him. He's able to get out of the Batmobile, jump on the roof of the car, and just as it looks like he's about to save Max, the previously seen driver of the 18-wheeler, does that character get a name? I don't think he gets a name, right? Just the nunchuck-wielding driver.
I put him as Zangief from Street Fighter in my notes. So that's...
Good call.
He never wears a shirt and he has a mohawk, so I just put him down as Zangief. But no, I don't think they ever give him a name.
I think the credits have him as Driver Kobra. So Driver Kobra with the nunchucks is instructed by Xander to get rid of him. So he jumps out, deals with them. They go with further hand-to-hand combat, knocking Terry off the roof of the flying car. As Terry descends in his bat suit, his wings expand, but the guy rips his wings right off, and Terry begins falling towards the ground. The driver, the nunchuck guy, gets back into the car as Terry heads to the ground, crashing a severe crash landing in an alley. Now wingless and quite possibly unconscious in an alley. Meanwhile, Xander is speeding off in his car with Max in his back seat. So, and then we get, as we mentioned, for the first time in a couple of episodes here, the to be continued flash across the screen. And that's where we leave things for this week. And we'll pick up again on our next episode for part 2. So, my first impression of this, Liam, and I will be interested to see how it sticks with part 2. But it feels like we set up a lot of stuff. We spent a lot of time in this episode setting things up. We have this whole Terry feels inadequate. He feels like a loser. He's letting Bruce down because he didn't stop this gang from stealing the bomb. He's learning how to fight at this dojo.
Mm-hmm.
You get this other mysterious student that's introduced. Turns out he's the Prince of Kobra or whatever he is.
Mm-hmm.
And then he steals Max, and that's the end of the episode. And the last, last 60 seconds fly by. It's just like action-packed, and it's just like, all right, the stakes are raised, and it's like, to be continued. It's like, man, things were just getting good, which maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a great storytelling device, but I thought the first 18 minutes, 19 minutes of this episode were an absolute snooze fest. Personally, it's just not very, and I get it. You're laying down a lot of backstory here, and maybe this is an issue with the production order versus air date order versus streaming order, DVD order, but we kind of already know who Kobra is, and your reveal that this guy is a Kobra agent as a surprise really feels needlessly drawn out. Like, you could have just shown him at the beginning that he was a Kobra agent. Why did we have to make that I don't understand that being a mystery for the first 15 minutes of the episode. It just makes it feel like we're kind of meandering. It feels like this would be, if this was a modern show that was streaming on a popular streaming service, this would be the episode where you're like, wow, they really just needed to pad the runtime here, didn't they? They just had they had a episode order for 10 episodes, and they needed an 8th episode, and nobody had any ideas. So they were like, well, what if Terry went to a dojo?
Yeah, and it's like it's funny because there is a little featurette on part 1 of this episode on the Blu-ray. I think it was filmed back during the DVD release and just ported over the DVD to the Blu-ray because the camera quality is not great. But they're talking about that, like, oh, like the whole idea here is like you're setting up a kind of a like two sides of the same story, how the other half lives thing with him and Terry. Like they're both these guys who they're training together and they both have this destiny that is going to eventually put them at odds. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. But one, we get that for about 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, and also Xander is infatuated with Max. And then also Kobra is stealing bombs and snake DNA or dinosaur DNA. Right. There's a Dr. Cuvier cameo, by the way. I don't know if we mentioned that in the recap. So I guess there's splicing involved at work here. So here's where, but yeah, it's that could have been interesting, right? Mm-hmm. I almost feel like if we started out there, like if we just have 2 lines of dialogue that says Terry at the start, like complaining about, like, I can't believe Bruce thinks I have to train more, and then you just start with him meeting Kyrie.
Right.
I guess maybe they're like, there's so little Batman in the episode that we needed to have another like Batman action sequence thrown in here. Maybe that's part of it too. But it's like, okay, you have Batman fight the Cobra guys, he gets his butt kicked. All right, then you have to go have him and Bruce have the talk. Then he gets sent there. Then you do the training. He meets Xander for like half a second. And we have to establish that Xander is like super standoffish and has these bodyguards. And then you have to have them have their little heart to heart. And then they have their fun little night out. It's like, okay, if that was like the first act of the episode, and then the second act was Xander kidnapping Max, and then the third act is Terry trying to figure out what's going on and why they're, what's going and all that, maybe there's something more interesting here at play. But it's like, if there is an interesting idea amongst all of this stuff they introduce here, it's the idea like Terry meeting someone that he kind of has a kinship with, and how ultimately they're going to be, on opposite sides at the end of this. It's like an Obi-Wan and Anakin thing. So sure. Like that could be an interesting idea, but again, that's about 3 minutes of the episode, and then Xander or Max being sort of pursued by a kind of stalkery supervillain it could be an interesting episode on its own, but that's kind of feels a little tacked on as well. So it's just kind of like there's some nuggets of an idea around here, but the whole package as so far, again, this is only part 1 we've watched so far. It's just, it's not super compelling to watch. And the idea of Bruce sending Terry to train with Kyrie from Day of the Samurai is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's fun little throwback to the old series or whatever, a little bit of continuity there. And
but it's also not, it's not overt to the point where you know who this person is. Like you have to, which is okay. Like if you just want to do it for fan service, that's fine. Right. But the line that Bruce says, like, is an old friend of mine. So then when the reveal is, if you don't know who this person is, you're like, who the hell is this old friend of his that's this tiny Asian lady? Like,
to be fair, the way that scene is where he hands him like the business card and you don't see the name on it, you're like, is this going to be Dick Grayson? Is this going to be, is this going to be, who is this? Who's this old trainer of Bruce's that's going to show up here? And it's like, oh, it's the lady who's in like, who's like Master Roshi's not Master Roshi. I think that's from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Whatever the master was in Day of the Samurai and Night of the Ninja, who trained Bruce and Kyodai Ken, his other student who's in Day of the Samurai for a couple minutes. Like, okay. Yeah, it's not like that character was such a beloved fan favorite that people would be over the moon about her coming back. So, like I said, I think there's some nuggets of interesting ideas in here. It's just when you kind of press them all into one package, it's just feels pretty flat.
Yeah. Master Yoru, by the way.
Thank you.
Is the one from those two episodes. But yeah, it just feels so far like I also struggle with this idea that Terry's been Batman now for 3+ seasons. He's joined
47 episodes or something.
Right. He's a part-time member of the Justice League Unlimited, probably, maybe, kind of. But he gets beaten one time by a guy that it's not just hand-to-hand combat. He's beating him with like a taser nunchuck. And it's like, oh, I suck. And Bruce is like, all right, go get some karate training. It's like,
yeah, he didn't send him to Kairi like when he was fighting the world's deadliest assassin, Curare.
Correct.
Twice.
Correct. Or early on in his tenure as Batman, where he's like, only his training for fighting is literally being a kid from juvenile hall that got in fistfights. Like that's his combat training. So yeah, maybe, I don't know, Bruce, maybe this would have benefited your future Batman, I don't know, 44 episodes ago or something like that. But yeah, it just, there is certainly some interesting things here that I think could have been a little bit more interesting. As of now, though, it just feels like a bunch of ideas thrown up against the wall and kind of just mushed together. It's like it's like the Whose Line Is It Anyway scene in a hat where they just pick out like 5 things. It's like Terry goes to a dojo, and then it's like Kobra returns, the dinosaur DNA, giant bomb, Max is kidnapped. All right, go. Like they just picked a bunch of things out of the hat. So so far, my plot sits at a 4 out of 10. It's just that I was on the edge of like 4 or 5 out of 10 because I do think that those last 3 minutes of the episode, that's where the action is, the interest is, the tension arises. There's what's going to happen to Max. The cliffhanger is great. Like it just kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere, that you're just like, Terry crashes, he's unconscious in an alleyway, Xander's getting away with Max, we have no idea what his intentions are, we don't know what this crazy DNA is with the dinosaurs and where that fits in with the missing bomb. So the cliffhanger is good, but you probably needed like 2 of those elements. So as of right now, I'm sitting at a 4 out of 10 because it is unfortunately the last 3 minutes that really saved the episode for me, but thus far. But we'll see how that ends up in once we get finished part 2. What about you so far?
Yeah, I'm also sitting at a 4. Like I said, I am all for a lot of the ideas at play here. It just doesn't really come together, unfortunately.
So we will see next episode what becomes of our final score for plot. Spoiler alert. I
was going to say, that's the other thing too. Obviously, having seen these episodes before, not in a long time, it's like, I think part 2 is mostly just Batman fighting dinosaurs. So,
yep.
Like even any of the elements we talked about that we like the Max stuff, or Terry being like, having to fight his former fellow student. It's like, no, there's a lot of that goes by the wayside because we gotta do a lot of explaining about this like harebrained plot they have to blow up a volcano or something. We'll get to it next week, but yeah, I'm trying not to prejudge it until we've watched part 2 again. But yeah, this could be. I'm worried that 4 might be like too high, so we'll see next week, I guess.
Indeed. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals for this week. And I believe it's Coco Dong Yang once again responsible for the animation for this week. Well, we already established a lot of the first part does not have a lot of Batman in it. So we get the initial opening sequence, which is kind of cool. I do like it. It is pretty brutal for a normal. I guess they're getting towards the end of the series here, so maybe the gloves were coming off a little bit. But that disc shot that the Cobra driver takes to the face, it just like slices right into his cheek. I was shocked that he got a disc a bat disc right to the face,
Mm-hmm.
without any sort of like flashbang or anything like that attached to it. But sure enough, it hits him. No blood or anything, but you can tell that thing's digging in there. And then some pretty rough fisticuffs between Batman and the nameless Kobra agents that he's fighting. And then the fight that then ensues between the driver with the nunchucks and Terry, kind of brutal. Gets hit across the face a couple of dozen times
Mm-hmm.
with the nunchucks and electrocuted, and so that's kind of interesting. But uh, it's kind of boring, as we mentioned, until we get to the reveal, I guess, of the. I guess the fight is it the arcade sequence that takes place before the reveal of the DNA transformation stuff.
Yeah, I think it's like it's that, and then Terry goes and talks to Kyrie, and they find out Xander's not coming back, and then they cut to the lab. So I think it's
Right.
yeah, the arcade sequence is first.
As you mentioned, cool to see the Lost Cosmos video game come back. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that like robot design is neat.
Mm-hmm. Some good stuff there. The actual fight that takes place between our Joker's gang and the and Xander and Terry even a little bit there, but that's kind of fun to see. You don't get to see the whole Joker's gang in action. Well, it happens less frequently than you would expect it based on how prominent they were in marketing and on that first episode. But I guess they do pop up here and there. But this fight is kind of good because, as you mentioned, it features the original members of that J gang, J Man, and his posse all getting their tails handed to them. So that's kind of fun. Takes place inside an arcade. Kind of wish there was a little bit more interaction with the things around them. I mean, Max throwing the pizza the dish at the Jokers, and of course the pizza getting thrown and guys getting thrown into some of the arcade old timey stand up arcade machines is funny. But yeah, that's that until we get to the final scene, as I mentioned, the fight that the minimal fight that Terry has with the driver, the rematch. But then him like getting his wings ripped off is pretty brutal, and then him kind of struggling to crash land in the alley, and then they cut back to him, and the suit's all ripped up, and he's laying there unconscious. That's kind of cool. See the DNA of the suit, but yeah, I don't have a don't. I guess the Kobra bikes are something. The guys on the Kobra speeder bikes. I don't know. Yeah, not a lot else that I had to write here other than I did also laugh. You mentioned it, but the sequence where Max is very overtly flirting with the scientist so that Terry can buy some time, where she basically does a Bugs Bunny like blink her eyes 55 times at the guy. I did find that pretty amusing also for a visual, but not a lot else that I have written here as far as animation and visuals thus far. What about you?
Yeah, I think other than a couple of notes we already mentioned, I think that's I was like, oh, that's the same. I think that's the same dinosaur from Little Pizza Home. Okay, yeah, like I know. I feel like that was what I noticed. I like the Xander character design. Like he looks, he has like a really interesting head shape and like eye theory to him, and he kind of when he walks, he stands up very straight, like like he's been trained to be a politician or a royalty or something his whole life. So he has like interesting sort of posture and stances. So I think they did as good a job as they could have tried to just make him feel a little bit off when you first meet him. You don't really know what's going on. But yeah, other than what we've already kind of talked about, yeah, the way the Zangief Cobra guy fights Terry at the end, where he's kind of falling and climbing and all of this, these kind of more animalistic already, even before any splicing that we see is pretty neat. So, and setting up like a thug rival, like an Ubu type for Terry to have to keep going up against is kind of fun. So yeah, there's some fun little bits of action that we get, and yeah, the arcade sequence is kind of fun, but yeah, as mentioned, because it's so story heavy, yeah, and there's some good like kind of I think visual comedy, like Terry trying to balance the chair on his nose while doing like the Karate Kid crane pose is kind of funny, and Kyrie dropping the fish on the ground to make him trip up is fun. There's a cool sequence where when Terry first gets there and she like goes in the back, and the two students sort of attack him, where he's kind of staring at his own reflection in the pond, and then the two he kind of sees them in the reflection right before they strike. Is I thought was kind of a neat visual trick. So some cool ideas that they got to do. But yeah, again, also maybe and this maybe goes more back to plot, but you're doing, he's training at a dojo, and we don't really get any like, at least in part one here, any like epic martial arts like hand-to-hand fights. Which would also be would kind of be neat to see more of that like Eastern anime influence on this. So again, maybe we'll get to see that in part two. We'll see next week. But I ended up settling on I ended up going for a 6 out of 10, just because I do think some of the character designs are really neat. I like the arcade sequence. Having like an out of costume fight is fun for a change of pace here. And then, like I said, some of the character design and the sequence of like the when they show them testing the splicer gas, and like they're not only getting physically larger, but they show like one of the guys from behind, you see his skin ripping as the dinosaur spine kind of shoots out. Again, no blood, of course, but it does feel very visceral. It's not, it isn't just like a magic transition. You see the body sort of physically ripping itself apart as they transform into these things. So I thought that was a neat little kind of body horror thing that they managed to tack on there, even if it was a quick thing. So yeah, I'm sitting at a 6 after part one, at least.
Yeah, that's not too far off from where I am. I'm sitting at a 5 out of 10. I think the only other thing that I really liked that I didn't mention was in that sequence once Terry gets radioed by Bruce to go to Max's apartment after he's heard the break-in happen. They just do this one quick shot where they zoom in on Terry's hands, and he pushes the accelerator forward, and you see his whole arm light up with like the inside of the cybernetics for the connection to the Batmobile, I guess. Just something subtle. Really liked that, but I'm really just picking at stuff here to try and find enjoyment. I do like the designs also, and be interested to see. I feel like part two, especially if it being Terry versus a bunch of dinosaurs, is probably going to be visually at least interesting. So we'll see if those scores stick for part two. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And I did not catch who did music this week.
We have Mr. Michael McQuistion on the docket this week.
There we go. All right. So as far as music is concerned, you have the opening sequence, some traditional Beyond guitars and drum, and
there's almost like a Middle Eastern influence, I felt like, to some of the music when Kobra is revealed at first, like the Snake Charmer music almost comes in there.
Good call. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff that plays there at the beginning for sure, and then we get the sequence of Terry when he goes to the fish market. We get some traditional, what I assume is like Japanese influenced music, some woodwind instruments, and really coupled with the visuals of that sequence. Also, we didn't really get to talk about that, but the backgrounds for that sequence are pretty interesting looking.
Yeah.
Especially because it's a daytime sequence in Neo Gotham. So you can imagine what the inverse of what that would look like with like the neon signs and stuff like that, but it's all lit up in the daytime. So a really interesting look there. But as far as the music accompanying it also, it feels very traditional for what they were going for, really driving home the idea of Terry visiting this dojo. And then the reveal, as you mentioned, of the dinosaur men, kind of a freaky little reveal there as we see all the stuff behind the smoke and this crescendo of sound that occurs, and the screaming and the crying that's going on by our victims at the same time. And then I think the final sequence also, once Max is kidnapped, we get some really frantic music that accompanies Terry's pursuit, and then him getting taken on by the Cobra driver, and really just kind of like a crescendo that ends the episode as we see the car driving away. Terry is, slow pan out of Terry laying in this alleyway, all unconscious and suit ripped and all that. And that, I thought, also added to sort of the excitement for part two. Like, all right, here we go. We're stepping on the gas here for excitement. So, thought the music played a pretty important part for revving up the excitement for those last 3 minutes that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add there. Yeah, I think we covered all the beats there. Yeah, I like I said, the moments I really zeroed in on were kind of the Cobra theme that kind of comes in a little bit, and the more of like the martial arts, like Japanese influence of some of the training sequences of the dojo are fun. And then yes, we just get I think that especially that first one where Terry gets attacked by the two trainees, there's like some really interesting percussion in that. I don't know if it's like a xylophone or something that they're using there, or like a triangle or something, or a keyboard that mimics that, but it's an interesting sound. There's like a little ping ping that's going throughout that whole soundtrack that I appreciated. So yeah, I think so far music may be the highlight of this first part, at least here. I settled on a 7 for my tentative music score.
Yeah, we're 2 out of 3 so far on scores. I also have parked on a 7 out of 10 thus far. So yeah, it changes things up, provides some good atmosphere for certain sequences. Looking forward to see what we get for part 2 as far as our final score is considered. But yeah, pretty strong thus far as our categories thus far. All right, Liam, let's move on to our final category of the day, which of course is going to be voice actors and actresses. We'll go ahead and discuss this week.
A really big cast for this one. So we'll get to the main actors in a moment here. But yeah, playing Driver Cobra, aka Zangief, is Gary Anthony Sturgis, who we've talked about quite a few times as the voice of Eban, of course, on Static Shock. Which immediately, as soon as he's like the first voice you hear in the episode, and I was like, oh, it's Eban, okay, because he's just kind of doing the Eban voice. It's not quite the full Ice-T impression, but it's in the family. But yeah, he's voicing that character there. We have, as mentioned, as the guard that Cobra driver is talking to, is once again, this is like his third or fourth time popping up as just a random background guy. The voice of Homer Simpson himself, Dan Castellaneta, is here, and he has like maybe 2 or 3 lines. Like I have to assume him and Andrea Romano must have just been like pals, and so she would just be like, "Hey, come in and voice 4 lines for us," and whatever. But it's always like this funny little like blink and you miss it cameo from one of the, you could argue, one of the more famous voice actors of like the last 40 years. So
right,
always funny to hear him pop up there, even in a brief role there. Playing Dr. Banjari, the scared dinosaur scientist that gets attacked by Cobra. We have Brian George, another guy that we talk about all the time because he's done like a million voices, including Morgan Edge and the Parasite in Justice League, and he's the Jazzman in Batman the Animated Series. So quite a few. And Castellaneta is also one of the Cobra commandos, as they're called, apparently.
Oh,
for legal reasons, I imagine. So then we have playing Dr. Is it Childs? Childace? I forget how they pronounce it. Bald goatee man.
Yeah.
I think I believe it's a Dr. Childs, but he is voiced by none other than Xander Berkeley, who folks might know. Well, he's previously played. He's the voice of the RoboCop looking guy in Prototype, the Superman episode, and he's also one of the main guards in The Enemy Below in Justice League. So a lot of old favorites, and you also might know him from his screen work and things like Terminator 2. So he's got like a good sinister edge to him. Like he's got a little bit more color to him than your average like background bad guy, I think. Maybe because he has this sort of odd, slightly contentious mentor relationship to Xander as well. But he gets to be a little bit more than just like the evil scientist or the background guy. So I appreciated his work.
Yeah, not terrible. He, as you said, he's it's interesting because we know that the dynamic kind of switches here as we initially kind of see him as maybe the person that's pulling the strings, and then it's revealed that he's actually subservient to Xander. So yeah, he pulls off that switch pretty easily as we see it once he's in the laboratory. It's very clear that while he's making it clear that he did step in to pull Xander out, he is like doing it for his own good, but is also seemingly doing so with a tone of respect towards him. So yeah, it's some acting was required there. So not a bad performance thus far.
Absolutely. And then we have a little known voice actor by the name of Bruce Timm voicing the Joker's leader, J-Man, returning for once again here. And I gotta say, I don't remember what we've said about him because he only pops up in like a few episodes here and there across the series. But whenever this one pops up, I really appreciate it now because like there is a guy like this at every Comic Con. there is a guy dressed like the Joker trying to act like the Joker, and he is like, but he comes across as a really like try hard kind of a dork, and like Bruce Timm brings that energy to J-Man, I think, in his voice performance very well because he's just kind of annoying. Like
right.
He has none of the style or the panache of the actual Joker, even though he's the one that kind of most closely resembles the actual Joker.
Right.
So I always gotta appreciate that. I'm like, oh, he's a cosplayer, like he's a nerd, like and he's trying to play as like this hardened clown gangster, even though he doesn't have the sauce. But that totally works for this character because that's kind of what he is.
Yep, it's pretty funny, and I like that he immediately tucks his tail once he sees his gang around him getting beat up, and it comes across like I believe Bruce Timm is this Joker, so it is extremely funny. That's obviously one of the main people responsible for shaping the DCAU. Also, perfectly voices this guy that you just want to see get his tail handed to him.
Absolutely. And then then playing Xander, the man who would be Cobra Commando, is Alexis Denisov. Folks would probably best known him for a very long running role as the character of Wesley on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, the spinoff from Buffy. As well as a few other things.
He later goes on to voice Mirror Master also.
Correct. So he's got a very like, and again, I guess it works because we don't really know the origins of like what country Cobra started in.
Mm-hmm.
So he has this kind of very hard to place. It's kind of like I think what Helen Slater does with Talia in BTAS. It's like he's got this weird, it's like it's kind of Middle Eastern, it's kind of European, but it's not one thing in his accent. Like it's a little bit British and upright and posh, but it's not quite that completely. Like there's an odd combination where you feel like all these different cultures have kind of come together to form this amorphous Cobra cult, and so his voice is kind of an amalgam of all of them. I don't know, but I really thought he did a good job voicing this kind of strange, aloof, and kind of confused by the world guy.
Yeah, he definitely it's his sheltered life, not understanding or knowing what pizza is. It doesn't come across. It's weird though because it doesn't come across as like innocent, oblivious. It's just like disinterested oblivious in a way, which I think works for the character because obviously he's being trained to be the leader of a giant snake cult. So why would he be? I mean, he's ultimately convinced to go try pizza, but he's more interested in winning at the contest of video games rather than understanding how virtual reality works or being in awe of the invention of virtual reality. Like he's just interested in winning the contest.
This isn't like a like the Disney film where he's just like enchanted by the magic of the world. He's just like, no, I love, like he's upset and then kind of becomes infatuated with Max because she beats him in this contest, no matter what it is. Like, he becomes very single-minded. Yes, there's interesting layers to his performance that I think are pretty good. And then we have Takeo Fisher, or Takayo perhaps Fisher, voicing Kairi Tanaga here. You might know her from she's in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I think one of the good ones, not the last two they did. And she was also in Moneyball. She's Brad Pitt's secretary in that movie. So a lot of very long lists. Another person that has probably done like an episode of almost every like procedural network television show of the last 20 years, it feels like. But here she is as the old wise dojo master. She does a good job, I think, especially as you mentioned at the start. She's doing this very like stereotypical broken English, kind of almost shouting at Terry about her different types of fish, and then she kind of keeps the accent up until she gets, until she reveals herself and she's changed her clothes into the gi. And then she kind of drops it at that point and talks in her normal voice. And she still has like the hint of an accent because it is still, English still isn't her first language, but it's like, it is a fun twist and a good chance for Miss Fisher to kind of show off her skills as an actor. You play, like, again, probably a part she was asked to play in earnest quite a bit in her career, if I had to guess, which is the Asian woman, the old Asian lady who yells in broken English, and then get to kind of twist that on its head and be like, it's just a gimmick I use for to charm the locals, kind of thing. Is kind of a fun little twist. So she gets to be a little bit more interesting as the episode goes as well.
Yeah, she does a fine job. I think the switch is funny. I think the explanation for the switch when she says, "Hey, it sells fish," is kind of funny. Imagine the stereotypical American only wanting to buy fish from somebody if they have a broken accent. It's kind of funny. But yeah, she does a fine job. I buy that she's sort of a wise old trainer at this point. Like, she runs the dojo, she's the sensei now, so all of that comes across in her voice acting. So yeah, I think she does a fine job for what's asked of her.
Absolutely. And then we of course have briefly have Kevin Conroy as Bruce Wayne. As mentioned, DNA and thermal bombs, what's the connection? That's my highlight for Kevin in this episode, just because of how, like I said, I just think it's a terribly written line.
Great.
But he does his best. No, he's there to do a lot of exposition, mostly in this one. So that's why I mentioned him first. We do have probably one of the more expanded roles. We've gotten Cree Summer as Max in this series. As mentioned, she and Kevin kind of get to spar a little bit again this week, and they're kind of arguing and all of that. So that's kind of fun. Her interactions with Mr. Denisoff as Xander is fun too. Like, she has this kind of carefree attitude, and she's just very, like, there's no fear, there's no there's nothing. She doesn't treat him any differently than she would anybody else. So and then again, as you mentioned, the kind of, she tries so hard to just like let him down easy and just be like, all right, thanks, this is nice, but like, not right now, buddy.
Right.
And the kind of the switch to like the fear once he breaks down the door and stuff. So yeah, it's nice to hear her get like we said, even though the plot probably doesn't focus on that enough, it's fun to hear her get a little bit more than just kind of be there to be a sounding board for Terry this week.
Yeah, I agree. It's her back and forth with Terry, kind of like, again, sort of teasing the audience. She's going to get some karate training too, in case she joins the Bat team at some point. Some martial arts work done here. But then once she sees that Terry has to drink a nasty concoction, she's out. Like, her comedic timing's pretty good with that, and also with the little interaction with Bruce also, and her terrified scream over the phone is quite haunting. So that's always a good test. What do you buy? The actual fear coming out of the person's scream? Yes, I definitely bought it there. So yeah, some excellent work there from our from her for this week.
Absolutely. And then we just have our future Dark Knight left to talk about, Will Friedle. again, I wish we had focused in more on him and Xander becoming like unlikely friends, and then sort of the tragic element of knowing they're going to get broken apart by their different paths. Like that's an interesting idea, and the little bit we get to hear him playing off of Mr. Denisoff as Xander, and then that those two along with Cree Summer as Max. Like it's fun, and like I said, but it's unfortunately kind of only one or two scenes, and they don't really get a ton of interaction otherwise. So I feel like the rest of the time he does get a little bit to do because we have these scenes with him talking to Bruce and he's really down on himself. It kind of goes back to what you were saying, which is not a critique of Will Friedle. It's a critique of the more, again, of the plot of like, you introduce all these interesting threads that I'm sure as an actor, Will would be happy to pull on. That's one of the things he mentions in that featurette. It's like, oh, I was excited. The idea of like, well, even though he has this futuristic bat suit, like he still has to learn how to protect himself beyond that. And I think that's interesting. It's like, yeah, that could be interesting for an episode, but that's like a little sliver of it. And then, yeah, the fish out of water thing where he's trying to show Xander, the fun side of life and they're becoming friends. It's like, that could be something fun, and then like the danger of his best friend getting kidnapped, like that. Like there's a lot of things he gets to play with, but he gets to do them for like 2 minutes each. It feels like he doesn't really get to sink his teeth into a lot, even though he gets to play with a few different emotions throughout it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of the uncomfortability he has in his initial training, and then garnering a little bit more comfort, I guess, as the stuff goes on, but still not completely comfortable with the idea of this martial arts training. There's the uncomfortability. He manages to convince Xander to break curfew, but then like is kind of surprised that he wants to fight people like immediately. So he's got to show some regret there. There's just not a ton for him to show as far as emotion, other than maybe that little bit at the beginning where he's super down on himself and depressed and feels like he's let Bruce down. But I think that performance is good. Again, as far as how it relates to the actual story arc of Terry's Batman, it probably doesn't make a whole ton of sense to me. But with that said, Mr. Friedle did a fine job, I feel like, for the episode, especially interacting with Miss Summer and certainly with Mr. Conroy as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, after part one of this, I am sitting at a 6 out of 10 for my voice acting score. I don't think anybody's like great. Like I said, I do like Alexei Denisov as Xander, and I think Cree Summer and Will Friedle do their part as well. So I don't think anyone's doing a bad job, and like I said, I think some people are doing a pretty good job. It's just I think they're kind of let down by a kind of flighty plot that doesn't let anybody really sink their teeth into any specific nugget that could lead to something better.
Yep, that's we're 3 of 4, so I also ended up with a 6 out of 10 for at least for part 1 thus far. So we will check and see what our score is, how they fluctuate, if they move at all up or down, with next episode when we cover the part 2 of the Curse of the Kobra. But as of now, Liam, totaling up my score, I'm sitting at a 22 out of 40. What about you?
And I am just 1 point higher at a 23 out of 40 after week 1. So we'll see if that discrepancy gets any larger or smaller as the
to be continued, as one might say. But yes, Liam, that will begin to wrap us up for this week's episode. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, we will again give our final scores in part 2. In the meantime, if you'd like to support the podcast, there are several different ways you can do so. You can, of course, follow us on social medias at DCAU Review. We're on all of them. That's right. Every single one you could possibly think of. Not Parler or Truth Social, or what was the last thing before Blue Sky was a thing?
I was trying to remember that because I did make an account for it.
I remember. I was just like, yep, nah. Well, whatever. We have one on whatever the thing before Blue Sky was too, if it still exists. But yeah, we're on all of the major ones. So go ahead and follow us on there. Interact with us. We're not guaranteeing immediate responses on Threads or Blue Sky or the ancillary ones, but hey, we're there. Join us if that's your preferred method of contacting us. Feel free to join in the conversation at DCAU Review, and you can certainly join in there. You can also, of course, if you're listening on Spotify, which I know a lot of our listeners listen on Spotify, you can comment now on each and every episode that we leave. So if there's a specific note that you have about a specific episode, you can comment directly on there. You don't have to sign up for a single social media app at all, and we'll get the notifications and see those comments. So speaking of your favorite podcast app, subscribe to us on there. That's another way to support the podcast. Leave a 5-star review. If you listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, both of those platforms allow 5-star reviews. That helps us out a lot. That gets more ears on the product. And it also, will encourage us because we see a 5-star review. We're like, hey, we're doing something right here. Of course, if you don't think we deserve a 5-star review, leave whatever star review that you want to. But, be kind, please. Be nice. But if you leave a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast platform and a little blurb with it, and you live within the continental United States, we'll send you a little thank you gift just for taking the time to do so. You can, of course, also support the podcast. Check out the show notes. There is a link to become a monthly supporter. We have many monthly supporters to thank that help us and support us on a monthly basis just for doing this podcast. And we thank you for your generosity and your kindness in supporting what we do and making us feel like it's not all for nothing. So thank you for those. And if you want to join them, check out that link. You can also support the podcast by checking out the link to our merchandise store as well. I'm sure there's some Black Friday deals coming up here shortly. If you've been waiting for a sale, that would be the time to get yourself a shirt or a mug or a sticker at the cheapest possible price. So check that out in the show notes as well. So Liam, speaking of Black Friday, coming up next week, believe it or not, here in the United States, next week is Thanksgiving. So it's one of our traditional week offs. We'll take a break from our standard fare, pushing us. So it'll technically be 2 Saturdays from now before you hear part 2.
I was going to say, go back in your head, listener, and strike from the record all the times I said next week when I talked about part 2, because yes, that'll actually be in 2 Saturdays from now.
But we're not leaving you empty-handed because it is the season of giving, as we like to remind our listeners. And we love giving gifts. Liam and I are big gift givers. Love giving gifts, and especially the listeners of the podcast. So we started a tradition. I think it was the 2nd year of the podcast, and we've pretty much done one every year since, Liam. And it's our Black Friday special. And that gives us a time to nerd out even deeper. We're not just talking about cartoons. We're talking about what everyone associates the holidays with. Not your drunk uncle spouting his political beliefs. No, we're talking about toys, baby. And this year we've got a very fun one that I'm looking forward to, Liam. Sort of similar to what we took it in a new direction last year. We didn't just do a listicle of the best whatevers. Instead, we sat down and we wrote Santa McFarlane. We wrote him a wish list. You can check that out in the archives. Of what we wanted for our next, if we were fantasy booking a Batman the Animated Series line, some figures that we wanted him to add. And believe it or not, a couple of those wishes have come true. And so Todd must have gotten our letter, and he's listening to us. So this year, we're taking our wish list to a different version of Santa. We're letting Todd have the Christmas off, the Christmas holidays off. And instead, we're going to the fine people over at Funko/Mondo, and we're going to write a very special wish list from the DCAU review to the fine creators over there, Liam.
That's right. So, just recently, as we talked about all over our social medias, Mondo, who already had an incredible line of Batman the Animated Series figures with all these incredibly intricate alternate accessories and parts that are reference specific episodes, They just announced a Batman Beyond figure that they put up for pre-sale that Cal and I both, that Cal got and then bullied me into getting.
Facts.
So yeah, it's just full transparency here. So now that they have ventured outside of the main BTAS line into other DCAU shows, we thought we would do a little bit more fantasy booking, and send Santa Mondo our requests for a few other DCAU figures that we hope to see them make sometime in the future. And so we're not only going to talk about the figures themselves, what we'd like, but also probably try to think of some episode-specific accessories they could come with and things like that. So really looking forward to getting just extra nerdy next Friday on Black Friday, as we bring you our now yearly tradition of one of these episodes where we try to figure out exactly how nerdy we can get when it comes to the DCAU toys. And I'm looking forward to it.
It is going to be a blast. In the meantime, if you're here in the U.S. and you celebrate Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. We hope it's certainly filled with good things, good fun, and whether you're celebrating with family or friends or by yourself, we hope that you know that you're loved and cared for, that you feel that we, especially here at the DCAU Review, are thankful for you for listening. So hope you have a warm and wonderful Thanksgiving holiday here in the U.S. If you're not in the U.S. and you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, we hope you have a wonderful, normal Thursday afternoon. And catch us on Black Friday for our Black Friday special. It's going to be a blast. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DC Review.
Bye-bye.